Ever been curious about the background of your favorite Naraka hero? Perhaps you haven't been able to finish their cultivation, or want to learn about a hero you don't plan to play. Welcome to the Naraka Legends lore series, where we tell the heroic tales of each character verbatim from the in-game chapters. Join us on today's quest as we delve into the history of Kurumi Tsuchimikado, the Onmyoji. There were originally 3 main powerful families that lived within the Helioth Kingdom, yet only one remains into the present day, the Tsuchimikado, a line that relied on its Onmyoto talent to hold its position. Kurumi Tsuchimikado, known as the Flower of Helioth, was primed to become Helioth's first female Onmyoji. Yet as enemies of the kingdom drew closer, the demons sealed within her sword teacher grow ever more restless. Hence, she set out on a journey to uncover the secrets of the universe, to protect her family line, and to carry out the duty of an Onmyoji. For Kurumi believed that, upon Morus Isle, she would find the answers she searched for. The little boy withered under the elder's glare. Sweat pouring, he uttered the incantation so desperately it sounded more like a prayer. But his prayers were not heard. The clouds did not bestow rain and the flower wilted. Instead, only tears fell and his devastation bloomed across his face. Why do you cry when we asked for rain? Do you believe your tears are enough to move the hearts of the living? The elder's voice was soft and lethal, like the first sigh of winter. Their fatigue and disappointment were knotted into their mouths. Almost every boy had failed the trial, and with each failure, the hope in their eyes shriveled into brittle despondency at enduring another winter before finding a capable Onmyoji. The last candidate was the smallest, his robes swallowing his dainty frame and face. He mumbled, his voice barely audible in the silence. The elder's attention was already turned away, but one peered down, curious. "I do not recognize you." The boy did not respond. "Speak up, child." Without looking up, he murmured with a voice as tender as new petals. "An open heart sees a friend where a closed one sees strangers." The older Onmyojis rustled like branches under a storm cloud. Their eyes followed the boy like dew tracing a leaf's spine. His finger drew a horizontal line. Then underneath, a vertical line flowed like a steady stream of water. He raised his hand. The line continued, flowing into an open square. When he connected the earth, water and sun with a single line down the center, an unshakable root, the clouds began to churn. The elder recognized his movements. There was a flair about them, a familiar grace. He knew of only one person who possessed such genius and flaunted it with such cavalier charm. "Stop the test!" he called. But his voice was buried by the heavens. The clouds blushed a violent shade of lavender and swelled, ready to burst. The candidate finished the spell by drawing 4 delicate raindrops, and the heavens, as if granted permission, let forth a sparkling downfall of pure and clean rain. The flower unraveled from its dry and dead skin as a soul leaves a body. Its reborn petals and leaves glowed. Beside it, the barren soil turned lush with shoots of young grass. More flowers sprouted, and their perfume mixed with the smell of rain was a soothing balm for all people present. The incantation finished, the holy rain subsided. As he threw his head back to inhale his garden, the hood fell. "Kurumi Tsuchimikado!" the elder bellowed furiously. "Girls are forbidden from this trial. You know this." His displeasure was enough to weed his voice out from the reacting crowd. She smiled sweetly. "I didn't drink and boil the dirt underneath my teacher's fingernails to sit and look pretty." The floor was a graveyard of crumpled and shredded paper talismans. Kurumi laid face down, her sorrow befriending the dust on the tatami. Her eyes were dark voids like the well of an inkstone, her lips pale and dry as paper. "Carry yin and embrace yang," she recited soullessly. "Existence gives birth to non-existence. Fulfill purpose quietly, but do not contend." Her hand picked up the brush again, sheerly out of habit. She wrote the characters that she had practiced 1,000,000 times. Her red ink pad had run dry, so she sliced the fresh scab on her thumb once more to complete the call to the deities. The paper glowed, a faint white light fighting off the inky darkness of the room. "Feel the unfelt, hear the unheard, my lovely Kurumi," a voice teased. Kurumi felt the corners of her memory unravel and smoothed out, details of her grandfather's face modeled into the back of her eyelids. The deep wrinkles in his pale, translucent skin, the wise glimmer in his eyes that even cataracts couldn't blot out, his thin lips forever folded into a wry smile. Like layered strokes of watercolor, his eyebrows frowned at her. She bit down on her tongue, fighting off tears. An Onmyoji must look beneath the surface and feel the heartbeat of the world. But I can't feel your heartbeat anymore, grandfather, Kurumi thought. Once you feel it, you will smile, for it becomes your heartbeat. My heartbeat, our heartbeat. His words caressed her head, firm and gentle as only her grandfather's hand could be. Her final memory of him haunted her, the last expression on his face as he had screamed at her to run away to safety. The magmata jade had shredded his skin so easily, hair and veins fluttering in the air like confetti. The demon of Orochi had flailed and hissed, petals of blood and flesh whirling around him, pushing him away from Kurumi. She only had her memories and testimony, words that stained her damned in the eyes of her family, the elders, and the entire kingdom. If only I wasn't so conceited. If only I hadn't summoned it. Why did I think I could control it? Why did I have to do that? If only I can turn back time. If only... Grief ate away at the feeble light of her last paper talisman. The final strip of her strength crumpled up. Past, present, and future folding into each other. Kurumi felt the darkness lift a veil over her head, and she saw the world as it truly was for the very first time. Dark and overwhelming. Not real, yet true. So, this is the heartbeat of the world, grandfather. The mouth of the valley opened wide, its teeth the falling autumn leaves, its tongue a wet black void. It waited for them, growling with hunger. They sat as shells of themselves, a samurai without his armor and an Onmyoji without her heart. Kurumi looked towards their destination, the darkness hinting at its unforgiving depths, and wondered if she had gotten her up and down mixed up. It was Takeda who thought of the idea, but she had agreed to it, believing it was a way to climb up and out of her grief. She felt as if she was digging deeper into it instead. Whenever you were ready, Takeda groaned, unable to mask his pain. She nodded out of reflex. She didn't feel ready at all, but Takeda stood and so did her legs. They descended further in. The ground rustled. They held their steps and breaths. This was a kind of black that no eyes could adjust to. She could have summoned a light, but the physical world was finally as dark as the shadows inside of her, and that horror bound her. So you have come back for your demise. A pair of eyes glowed and blinked languidly. Takeda sprinted forward, katana ready. With but a breath, it knocked him back. Kurumi knew Takeda's physical attacks were hopeless. He continued, however, charging and being repelled in an endless cycle. She realized she had manifested into reality her own futile cycle of struggle and despair. Kurumi squinted. No, it wasn't the demon breaths that were knocking Takeda back. It was something familiar, something gentler. She felt the earth under her feet fall away when she realized what it was. Her grandfather's seal. It was protecting Takeda. It was protecting her, even from beyond the grave. Unaware, Takeda took his scabbard in his other hand and used it to push on the back of his blade. He began to slice through the seal. If that seal broke, Kurumi thought, the demon of Orochi would awaken and their deaths would become absolutely certain. A little bit more! Takeda grunted through gritted teeth. His blade had cut through enough that it revealed the magmata jade at its core. Her brain screamed at her. She knew what to do. She knew exactly how to do it, even why she must do it. But it felt like nothing could compel her body to move. None of her studies ever unearthed the secret to sorrow, the cure for loss. Before her grandfather's death, Kurumi had sealed the wounds of others without considering the pain that she was healing them from. It felt like all her thoughtless showmanship was coming back to bury her alive. Shame! I thought you'd be more interesting. Her own voice cheerfully jeered. Her past brightness suddenly brought out her present decay in stark contrast. She had been standing under the ravages of constant, daily rain, and only now felt its drops and the weight of the emotional rust on her skin. Kurumi blinked like she just woke up from a deep slumber. The first thing her eyes focused on were the jade and Takeda's blades slowly carving into it. She pushed off from the now solid earth, materializing beside Takeda. The jade glowed, sensing her. Kurumi recognized it immediately, the shrewd gift grandfather left behind, hidden by the seal to unsuspecting eyes. Stand back, it's too dangerous! She went closer. Only she could finish the incomplete prayer her grandfather had cast into the jade. With the prayer complete, the seal crumbled. Kurumi grabbed both the jade and Takeda's collar and materialized them above. Freed! The demon hissed and snapped its fangs at them. But with the seal gone, the valley released a fearsome mudslide on both banks and the earth swallowed it whole. They fell and crashed into the canopy of trees lining the brown and red gash of mud and rock. She looked over at Takeda and he at her. His expression asked her what he had missed. It was so funny that she had to laugh. Lesson learned. There was no secret to sorrow nor a cure for loss. Only a constant striving to remember the fond memories sorrow erases, to eat when loss seasons all food disgusting, to dig out the strength constantly buried by despair. The journey had just begun and the path was long, but Kurumi felt it was possible. The jade glowed in her hand, as if agreeing with her. "If us girls are so weak," yelled Kurumi, raining blow after blow upon the young boy, "what does that make you?" The boy stumbled backward and fell into the dirt. "Please, stop! I yield!" He dropped his wooden practice sword and raised trembling hands to shield himself from another attack. Kurumi's body quaked with rage as she drew back her weapon to strike him again. But then she remembered herself. This boy was her friend, the son of a local farmer she'd been playing with for almost 6 months. And he'd always been good to her. She took a deep breath, calming herself, and offered him a hand. "Stand up, Wakanumaru!" The boy rose and dusted himself off. His simple cotton tunic was torn and dirtied, and a trail of red streamed from a gash on his forehead. "I was only joking," he complained, wiping blood on his sleeve. "You shouldn't take things so seriously. And you shouldn't leave your guard open," she retorted. "You won't survive long on a real battlefield with such recklessness." The boy shook his head, laughing. "You're a strange one, Kurumi. Sometimes I think you confuse our play for the real thing." His laughter made her feel suddenly guilty for losing her composure. Though they were both 11, Kurumi had seen far more than this boy could ever imagine. The most Wakanumaru could hope for was being a farmer like his father, but she had the world at her feet. At least, it had seemed that way before her grandfather's death. "My father is going to kill me." The boy raised his arm to examine the tear under his sleeve. "Maybe you could fix it. They must have needle and thread in the palace." "Of course," sighed Kurumi, frustrated with her fate. "I was once a promising healer of men. Now I'm a healer of garments." When she'd met Wakanumaru, she hadn't wanted him to know her true identity, so she'd told him she worked as a handmaid in the palace. Maybe I should do it for real. Run off and serve some faraway lord his tea and supper. A bark erupted suddenly from the trees and, startled, the two children turned to see Mochi, Wakanumaru's patchy-haired mutt, emerging from the forest. The dog was in a frenzy, yelping and leaping frantically back and forth. "What's it come over him?" asked Wakanumaru. "He's found something," determined Kurumi, setting off after the dog. Mochi led them through dense trees to a dirt road that snaked south. "We should turn back," whined the boy as they passed a wall of rocks that marked the city edge. "We're outside the border now. Bandits roam here." "What are you, a girl?" She flashed a playful smile to accompany the jab she knew would keep Wakanumaru moving. After several minutes, Mochi led them around a bend in the road, and when Kurumi saw what lay ahead, she froze. A rickety wagon had become stuck in mud, and around it were half a dozen bodies. Some had slashed throats, others claw marks on their faces and chests. One even had his arms ripped from its sockets. She turned to see her friend staggering backward, his eyes wide with panic. "I told you we shouldn't be here!" But Mochi still beckoned, leaping from the road into the woods and barking madly. In that moment, Kurumi wasn't sure what came over her. Perhaps she wanted to show Wakanumaru she was brave, or perhaps she'd seen so much horror already that she no longer had patience for fear. "Come on," she said, taking the boy's hand and leading him after Mochi. They climbed over thorny brambles and fallen limbs to reach, finally, a small cabin that sat alone in the woods. It looked to have been abandoned years ago, with slanted, caving walls and creeping vines along the roof and windows. Yet it was what the dog had wanted them to find. "Kurumi, please," pleaded Wakanumaru. "We've come far enough. There's danger here." But Kurumi wasn't scared. In fact, the closer she got, the more emboldened she was. She grabbed the entry handle and pulled, and the rotten door swung open, then fell from its hinges. Inside, a man sat on the dusty floorboards, propped against the wall and clutching a sword. He was wrapped in torn robes and splattered with blood, but he was alive. Just barely. Kurumi turned to Wakanumaru and spoke. "There must be a barn or some out-of-the-way place?" "Yes," the boy responded, pale, glassy-eyed, and trembling. "If I heal this man, can we hide him while he recovers?" "Heal? But how?" "Can we hide him?" she snapped. "Will he be safe?" "I think so, yes. But..." With her grandfather's death on her conscience, a part of Kurumi had also withered and died. She had shown such promise, yet her recklessness had brought death to the one who loved her most. From that day on, her powers had become unstable, even dangerous, and she dared not use them. But seeing this man in front of her, she knew she had no choice. Without her help, he would die. The certainty of that simple fact somehow evaporated all doubt, and for the first time in months, Kurumi let the magic flow through her. "Stand back!" she warned Wakanumaru, whose face betrayed his confusion. Until now, the boy had only known her as a handmaid, but today he would discover she was so much more. Kurumi traced a triangle in the air, her finger leaving behind a faint golden glimmer. Then she traced a square, and inside of that a circle. The movements came back so naturally, as did the words of the healing incantation she'd memorized as a much younger child. As she spoke them, the cabin began to sparkle with a heavenly glow. Mochi hid his face and whimpered. Wakanumaru stared like he was seeing a ghost, and Kurumi finally summoned forth the great power she'd kept bottled up for so long. Become the legend you were destined to be. If you enjoyed this video, please help grow the channel by liking and subscribing. See you on the battlefield, brave warrior.